So good afternoon, everybody. Hope you are doing well during these challenging times. So I think, right, before we begin, right, I would like to ask this question. Have you guys ever wondered what UX designers do when they talk about design research? What is design research all about in the first place, though? So with that, right, I'd like to welcome you to today's learning lunch about UX research, design research, or what I call Design Research 101. So just to introduce myself once again, my name is Wilmer. I'm a senior designer from the Design and Strategy Hive at Palo IT, where we are an international consultancy specializing in human-centered design, agile software development, and the transformation of forward-thinking company. So today you will learn about the various types and methods of design research and how we can approach doing it. I will also take this opportunity to explore the future of design research, something that greatly excites me. So for any questions regarding today's sessions, please feel free to put your questions within the Zoom chat. So I'll try my best to answer you at the end of the learning lunch. So I hope this session, right, will be useful for people who are interested in design research and want to explore more in this area. So for designers, right, who have some experience in user research, right, I hope this learning lunch, right, will give you some ideas on how to approach research on any types of projects. So I think without further ado, right, let's jump into our very first question for the day. What is exactly design research? So to explain design research at its very core, right, is an investigation of user behavior and needs in order to design potential solutions. In short, it's all about understanding user behaviors and needs through a structured process. It helps us to identify problem spaces for which design solutions are proposed. I guess some of you might be more familiar with the term user research, and you might think, what's the difference? Truth be told, however, I think user research and design research are the same thing. For me, right, I prefer the term design research as it describes the overall research framework from a product perspective, whereas user research, right, tends to focus more on the end user. So I mean, that's the reason why I prefer the term user research, because I'm focusing from a product perspective. So for the next question, why do we research? Well, I think, right, I like this quote from the author Lara Boucher. I hope I didn't mispronounce her name. Her quote basically describes research in a nutshell. To elaborate more, a lot of times, right, there can be disagreement between multiple stakeholders when it comes to developing a product. Design research in this instance, right, serves as a single source of truth from the end user's perspective. It acts as an alignment for the product team at the beginning, and design research, right, is a way to validate our decisions, right, with the end user towards the end. Nevertheless, right, there have been countless case studies about product failures throughout history, simply due to inadequate research. This is why, right, design research is the key to product clarity, an important step that we cannot afford to skip if we are to build meaningful and impactful products for our users. So moving on to the third and the last question, how do we do our research? So I think you know, typically we do user interviews, usability testing, surveys, and many others, etc. So now that you have some understanding of what exactly is design research, right, I'd like to give you an overview, right, of the research types out there. By nature, design research is broadly split into two types, generative and evaluative. Generative research, right, also known as exploratory research, is where we try to uncover and define the problem statement to be solved. This is where we want to find the what, which is the challenge or the pain point, the who is our users, and lastly, the hows, in terms of how they're experiencing this issue. In short, The key objectives of this type of research, right, is to form a key understanding of the design needs at hand before we move on to any potential design solutions. On the other hand, evaluative research, right, is all about evaluating design solutions, especially on their usability and feasibility with the end users. In comparison with generative research, evaluative research is somehow simpler as we know exactly what we want to look out for in terms of design validation. I think the findings and insights, right, generated from evaluative research, right, is very useful for the design team for subsequent iterations. And as such, right, evaluative research, right, is an important component within the context of product development. So after covering the two research types, I'll speak about how we can approach design research from a framework perspective. If you have attended any design thinking training, right, I'm pretty sure most of you are familiar with this 5-stage design thinking process. Using this as an example, right, here is how we can apply generative and evaluative research within each stage. As you can see on your left, right, the first two stages, right, empathize and define, these two stages, right, is all about identifying and defining the problem space. This is where we want to make sure that we have correctly set the groundwork, right, before we jump into designing anything. On the other hand, right, the last two stages, right, prototype and test, right, is all about evaluating and validating our design solution. For here, right, we want to focus on making sure that our ideas work as intended. If not, right, identify how we can improve them. If you focus on the third stage here, right, which is idea, right, this stage is a little bit unique in the sense that we apply both generative and evaluative research here. This is because potential design solutions at this stage, right, are often plenty and simple in nature. As such, right, design research, right, is very fluid, as we often need to pivot, right, if any design solutions does not work well at this stage. Now that you have some understanding of how design research can work with the design thinking process, right, we can apply this approach to the product lifecycle framework. In short, there are 4 product life cycles, namely introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. I think due to the lack of time, right, I will not explain each of the 4 product life cycles in detail, but you can read out on them, right, via a link, right, which I have provided towards the end, at the end of this session. So focusing on the first 2 life cycle, which is the introduction and growth, which applies to most of our projects at Paolo, we simply apply the same 5-stage research approach covered a few slides earlier. On the other hand, for the last 2 cycles, maturity and decline, I think there's a slight difference. In here, right, we add on to the additional evaluative stage at the beginning. I guess at this stage is very essential here, as it will allow us, right, to identify potential issues or opportunity by existing data, such as Google Analytics or some other ways like surveys and others. So any insights, right, created from this analysis, right, can be used to kickstart the entire development process, right, if we choose to improve the product. Recall what I mentioned. Any insights, right, created from this analysis, right, can be used to kickstart the entire development process if we choose to improve the product, or even reinvent the product in the case of the decline life cycle. So I think so far I have covered quite a fair bit. Let's take a 30 seconds break just to like absorb things and kind of key any questions, right, which I can answer towards the end of the learning lunch. So just to recap, right, our research technique, right, generally falls under these 3 distinct methods: qualitative, quantitative, and secondary. So to explain qualitative once again, right, is basically research which uncovers how individual behaves through their motivations, thinking, and attitude. So some examples, right, include users interviews and user testing, etc. So I think in terms of the data gathered, right, through qualitative research, right, it tends to be more naturalistic in the sense that we try to understand the actual reasons behind people's behavior and actions in the actual setting. So in the end, right, it's all about interpreting and making sense of what things matters to the end user in a humanistic approach. As for quantitative research, right, it's more focused on the numbers aspect. I mean, this means, right, we are using measurable data, right, to analyze findings and to uncover patterns. So some examples, right, are surveys and web analytics. So by nature, right, quantitative research tends to be more structured and focuses on the surface finding as opposed to qualitative research. And lastly, right, secondary research, right, is a research method which use of existing data available out there. So it kind of supports the primary research, which can be neither qualitative or quantitative by nature. So despite its name, right, secondary research, right, often kickstarts the entire research process for most people. So I think this is due to the fact that it is low cost and relatively easy to do. So some examples of secondary research, right, includes desk research, heuristic reviews, etc. So next, right, I'm going to run you through some of the common research techniques and tools we use within Paolo. So as mentioned earlier, right, desk research, right, is one form of secondary research, right, we commonly use at Paolo. Most UX designer I know, right, will start off with this, right, as it provides a good and low cost research basis moving forward. However, there are some limitations to desk research in the sense that there is always information which is not readily available, which will need to rely on some other research methods to uncover. User interviews, right, are, I think, one of the most commonly used qualitative research techniques. User interviews generate valuable insights from direct face-to-face interaction, right? It can be quite time-consuming in terms of the process and the preparation work needed. Contextual inquiry, right, is another method, right, where we will kind of observe the participants' daily activity on site for a period of time. For example, a day or two or so. So for give you an example, right, I mean, two designers, right, will be typically stationed at the workplace or in situ, right, to observe the participants performing their routine before ending the whole session with an interview, right, to ask any observation queries. As with user interviews, right, contextual inquiry is a source of valuable data collection for building user personas. Though it can be even more time-consuming and exhausting because there's a lot more preparation work and in-situ observation to be done. User testing, right, or we commonly call it UT as opposed to UAT, UT, is where we evaluate design solutions with the actual users. So depending on the situation, right, user testing may take place physically or remotely. As with user interviews, right, user testing forms the bulk of design research within Paolo. Generally, right, we stick to 5 to 6 participants for our user tests, with like around 85% of the usability issues uncovered. You may ask, why wouldn't we go for more people so that we can actually achieve 100% issues uncovered though? Well, typically we don't go for a larger sample size in this case, as the rule of diminishing returns, right, means that it's a waste of limited resources to run larger tests. So lastly, right, web analytics. Web analytics, right, is something which we are actually going into, right, nowadays, right, with some of our projects as well. I mean, it allows us to understand the overall usage of the products and websites via a quantitative perspective. So with regards to tools, right, as you can see the example here, we generally rely on neither Google or Analytics. There are some other products such as Adobe Analytics and Tableau as well for our needs as well. So I think one good thing about web analytics, right, is that you can choose to customize the various parameters, right, to search for what you need. But the downside is that it is not really useful when there's a lack of big data at the beginning of the design research phase, especially when, if you remember product lifecycle, right, when it comes to the introduction stage, right, frankly speaking, we are working with a clean state. There's no way that you can actually do web analytics at that stage in time. So after going through all the various research techniques we use, right, you may wonder, right, how do we exactly compile and utilize these research findings? This slide, right, shows how we can use our research finding. So in general, right, after every research phase in our project, we will kind of synthesize and compile the findings in the following research deliverables, which I have indicated in the middle color section here. As we move further into the design stream, this research, right, are translated into more tangible outcomes such as wireframes, prototypes, and libraries, etc. So as much as I would like to elaborate more on the research deliverables, right, I'll probably find another opportunity in this instance, another learning lunch, right, to kind of run you through, because it's like, so frankly speaking, to go through every single thing, right, it would take quite a fair bit of time. Anyway, right, please feel free to reach out to me if you want to find out more on this particular deliverable. So I think we have come to the last section of this learning lunch, which I will talk about the future of design research, something which I'm quite excited about. So, as Harvard Business Review, right, highlighted earlier this year, the world has been moving towards a data-centric future. In fact, right, Paulo has already identified this particular area, and we are strengthening our credentials with the fantastic work from our own data team. So from the DS Hive perspective, right, this is how we envision the future of design research. In short, right, we see us working in collaboration with specific focus where it comes to data science and design research. The key idea here, right, is that by combining our core expertise, right, from both team, right, we can approach product design in a more holistic manner. To kind of explain how this might work, right, this data science is all about extracting knowledge and insights from a sea of data. So to give an analogy, right, as an example, right, I kind of think of them as ocean explorers, trying to identify where and what is happening across the vast blue sea through various techniques like statistical analysis or even predictive modeling through machine learning. So where we as design researchers are involved, right, we kind of see ourselves as the deep sea explorer, trying to understand the different whys and the hows through, I think, the various research technique we covered earlier. So for example, right, if from data science, right, we uncovered that there's a specific area, right, which demands us, if they through uncovering a certain pattern, right, we as design researcher, right, can actually deep dive into the pattern and understand what is exactly causing that pattern in the first place. So now that we have reached the end of the learning lunch, right, I would like to highlight the fact that with Paulo's vision to make a positive impact to the world, design research is key and essential to achieve our ambition for tech for good. So I have prepared, to end it off, right, I have prepared some useful links for your reference. So as mentioned before, please feel free to approach me if you want to understand more about design research. So I think with that, right, I'll move into the questions if you guys have any so far. Yeah.